Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Silly Girl Meetup. We're talking about questions about psilocybin. Things you're too embarrassed to ask, some facts, some figures, and some good information for you this evening. So welcome, everybody. This presentation kind of addresses the most common and trending questions about psilocybin and microdosing. It's backed by recent scientific research and national surveys. So some of you have asked, how many people are using it? 11 million Americans use psilocybin in 2025, making it the most popular psychedelic out there. According to the 2025 RAND Psychedelic Survey, psilocybin use has reached unprecedented levels in the United States. 10,000 adults revealed striking patterns of psychedelic consumption. So 11 million US adults use psilocybin in the past year. It's the number one most used psychedelic, surpassing MDMA, ketamine, and LSD. 10 million adults specifically engaged in microdosing practices, which we talk about at length here with Silly Girl. 69% of those users microdosed at least once during the year. And over 200 million days of psilocybin use were reported, with nearly half involving microdosing. So it must be some powerful stuff if this many people are adopting it, wouldn't you say? It's no longer fringe right now. It's getting to be mainstream. And with millions of Americans exploring both therapeutic and wellness applications, the high percentage of users who microdose indicates a shift towards subperceptual routine use rather than occasional trips, right? So that means they're looking for something that's not perceived that they can use to forward their mental health and their overall well-being. It's a natural psychedelic compound that transforms into psilocin in your body. So what does that mean? This compound is found in certain species of mushrooms, commonly known as magic mushrooms, shrooms, or psilocybin. The compound's been used for thousands of years by indigenous people in Mexico and Central America as a part of a sacred and healing tradition. So when you ingest it, the body rapidly converts psilocybin into psilocin. That's the active compound responsible for the psychoactive effects. So psilocin interacts with the serotonin receptors in your brain, particularly the 5-HT2A receptor, and it's distributed throughout the cortex and the subcortex. And so the activation of these receptors leads to profound changes in perception, cognition, emotion, and a sense of self. So users may experience vivid visual imagery, altered sense of time and space, emotional release, spiritual experiences, and dissolution of their ego boundaries. It's not a synthetic drug, which is really awesome. So we know exactly how it interacts with your brain. It's a natural compound with a long history of traditional use. It also doesn't interact with a lot of stuff. And so it involves the brain serotonin system, which regulates your mood, your perception, and your cognition. It's pretty cool things. And how does microdosing differ from a full dose? Microdosing is about 1/10 of the amount of a full dose. You don't hallucinate. You just get really subtle mood enhancement, mind enhancement. So the distinction between microdosing and the full dose is a fundamental to understanding how this can be used in different contexts for different purposes, okay? So the full therapeutic dose, or macrodosing or journey, is 2.5 grams of dried mushrooms that you would eat or ingest with, in capsules or in liquid. Some people do it in a tea. It is a profound altered state. You hallucinate, you have ego dissolution, you have mystical experiences, and it lasts about 4 to 6 hours. It requires a controlled therapeutic environment with a trained facilitator. The purpose of this is deep psychological work, trauma processing, and spiritual exploration. Now, microdosing, subperceptual, is 0.1 to 0.2 grams of dried mushrooms. It's subtle. You can't perceive it. You don't hallucinate. You don't feel high. You have the effects throughout the day, and you can integrate it into normal activities. You can go to work, you can drive, you can do all your normal stuff. It can be done during the regular daily life, although I would try it, on a day off or something when you have nothing planned, just to be sure, see how it impacts you. It can make you a little sleepy. The purpose is mood enhancement, creativity, focus, anxiety management, ongoing wellness. It's really great stuff. So a microdose should be approximately 10% or less of a full dose, enough to potentially experience benefits without impairing your function. We don't want perceptual distortions. How does psilocybin work in your brain? Okay. So it desynchronizes your brain networks and it opens a window of enhanced neuroplasticity. What that means is that the neurons in your brain are normally very rigid and they perform in a certain way. When you're taking psilocybin, it actually makes your brain talk to itself in a very different way. In a landmark 2024 study published in Nature showed that psilocybin causes the brain networks that are normally fired in synchronicity to become desynchronized. So this disruption is more than 3 times greater than the effects of stimulants like, methylphenidate, right? The brain essentially falls apart temporarily and it breaks the rigid patterns of neural activity. So what I'm saying is, like, you're skiing down a hill, you ski down the hill the same way every day. There gets tracks in the snow, and it's really hard to bust out of those tracks unless you get a snowstorm, which is like psilocybin, right? Gives you a whole wide mountain with no tracks in it, so you can ski all over the place. It's kind of like that. The most affected network is the default mode network. This is active during self-referential thinking and maintains our sense of self, like, who am I? What am I doing? And when you disrupt the DMN, it leads to ego dissolution and the feeling of interconnectedness, often reported during psychedelic experiences, meaning we are all one, right? After the acute effects subside, the brain enters a state of enhanced plasticity that can last for weeks. And during this period, the brain is more adaptable and capable of forming new neural connections. Now, this is believed to be the mechanism behind psilocybin's therapeutic effects for depression, addiction, PTSD, anxiety, so on and so forth. So research shows that psilocybin dose-dependent induces the expression of genes associated with neuroplasticity in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. So these are regions critical for mood, regulation, learning, memory, so on and so forth. So it doesn't just make you feel differently, it fundamentally changes how your brain networks communicate. It creates an opportunity for the brain to reorganize itself into healthier patterns. And this is why the effects can persist long after it has worn off. So what are the potential benefits of microdosing? So users report improved mood, improved creativity, focus, all these things that happen while you're microdosing. It's gained popularity based on widespread anecdotal reports of benefits, though scientific evidence is still emerging right now. Places like Johns Hopkins and MAPS are doing a lot of studies along with a lot of other reputable organizations. Understanding both the reported benefits and the limitations of current research is kind of essential, right? So the benefits that people have reported are mood enhancement, cognitive performance increasing, creativity, more emotional awareness, energy and motivation, and an overall sense of well-being. So overall, it just makes you feel really good and it helps your brain work a little bit better. So some controlled studies do show measurable changes in pain perception, time perception, blood pressure, sleep, neural connectivity, social cognition. More rigorous, large-scale clinical trials are needed to distinguish genuine pharmacological effects from any placebo response. But be honest about the current state of the evidence. Many people do experience benefits. We can't yet definitively say how much is due to the psilocybin itself versus expectation. As these studies evolve, we'll have more and more scientific proof that shows this to be true. What are the risks and side effects? So some common side effects of microdosing are insomnia, maybe a disrupted sleep pattern. So you just adjust the time of the day that you take it. Restlessness sometimes. Poor mood or emotional instability related to emotional things coming up that you need to deal with. Sometimes people get low energy or fatigue, so you get a little sleepy. Physical discomfort, so it may cause a little stomach upset. Poor focus or cognitive functioning, which is the opposite of the intended effect, and you may need to adjust when you take it again and maybe do it at night. Risks of a full dose use is increased blood pressure and heart rate. Some people say a bad trip, but we believe there's no such thing as a bad trip. There's just a difficult experience. Nausea may happen, again, because it does upset the stomach at times. One review of microdosing literature called for more research on potential and chronic use. And so we're going to keep looking into that and keep sharing that with you. Emphasize that natural does not mean risk-free. While serious adverse events are very rare, especially with microdosing, side effects do occur and can be unpleasant. So be sure you're getting a proper medical screening before you do anything. Make sure that they're listening to you about what medications you're taking and see if there's any interaction problems. Make sure that you're working with a proper person to facilitate if you're doing a large journey, and you're working with a coach if you're doing microdosing, so you can give them feedback on anything you're experiencing and they can adjust accordingly. Who should not use psilocybin? We've gone over this in lots and lots and lots of these talks. Absolute psychiatric contradictions, which means don't do it. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, personal family history of psychotic disorders, severe depression with psychotic features, any previous bad experience with psychedelics, prolonged psychosis, suicidal ideation, anything like that. You really need to be honest with your facilitator and let them know if you're having any of these things or have a history of any of these things so they can be sure to screen you for that, okay? Also, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, if you have epilepsy or seizure problems, if you have severe cardiovascular disease, check with a physician before you move forward in any of these cases. This is not medical advice. It is just a good idea to talk to a medical professional before you do that and make sure you're thoroughly screened. Um, stress that medical screening I want to stress that medical screening by a qualified professional is absolutely essential before you use psilocybin. So go ahead and have that happen. What are the common microdosing protocols? So there's lots of protocols out there. There's a Fadiman protocol. There's a Stamets protocol. There are custom protocols. So the best idea is to start low and work your way up. Do it in the morning. And if that doesn't work because it makes you sleepy, flip it to at night. Preferably take it with food so it doesn't make you have an upset stomach. Stay subperceptual. You don't want to feel high. You don't want to be seeing things. Keep a journal, a detailed journal. Record the dose, the time, the mood, the energy, your insights, so that you can see over time, how this is impacting you and the progress you're making, just to be honest with you. And then the person you work with, your coach, your facilitator, can then adjust your dose with you accordingly. Avoid daily dosing because you do want to have those skip days. So follow a protocol of some fashion, right? And finally, we're going to dig into what you need to know. Psilocybin use is pretty mainstream. Like I said, 11 million Americans used it in 2025, 10 million engaged in microdosing. There is no longer a fringe practice here. There are two distinct approaches. There's macro, like the journey full dose. There's micro, sub-perceptual dose. They serve different purposes and they carry different risk profiles. So make sure you're working with somebody. Psilocybin works by desynchronizing your brain network. It opens a window of enhanced neuroplasticity lasting for weeks. This is why the effects can last long after it is cleared from your body. The benefits are promising, but not fully proven for microdosing at this point because the clinical trials of therapeutic doses show more robust evidence. So microdosing clinical trials are coming through right now, so stay tuned. The risks are real. Side effects do occur, and you cannot be using it for certain psychiatric conditions and medical conditions. So make sure you get a medical screening. The legal status is a bit complex. It's federally illegal, but legal for therapeutic use in Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, and new places are decriminalizing it every day. It is kind of following the trend of cannabis, so stay tuned on that. Therapeutic context is critical. Research shows benefits come from the combination of psilocybin and psychological support. It works better if you have help, long story short. And professional guidance is essential. So make sure if you're using it for therapeutic reasons, microdosing, macrodosing, you have a qualified medical professional review you and a mental health professional potentially for safety, efficacy, so on and so forth. And make sure you're working with a qualified facilitator. Don't just go sign up with Tom in his basement. Make sure that you know who you're working with and that they have qualifications to help you. Psilocybin represents a potentially transformative tool for mental health treatment. It requires respect. It requires caution, informed decision-making, and professional support to use it safely and effectively. While the science is exciting, psilocybin is not appropriate for everyone, as I mentioned in here, and should not be approached casually. Those interested should, prioritize being educated, getting medical screening, and compliance. So if you have an interest in learning more about this, you can get in contact with us at sillygirl.44 on Signal, or you can go to our website, sillygirl.com, and reach out to us at any time. If you have any further questions, you want to go into more of a deep dive, if there's anything you personally want to talk about that's a little more private. Thank you guys all for coming, and have a great rest of your day.